Hello and welcome to our first DVHS Girl Develop meeting of the semester. Today we'll be continuing the CSS unit from last semester, and we'll be going over selectors, IDs, classes, and divs. So as I said before, today we'll be quickly reviewing and learning new CSS code. We'll specifically be going over selectors again, differentiating between IDs and classes and when they're useful, and also covering divs. And then we'll also, as always, have practice for you to utilize the techniques you learned today, and we'll go over a sample solution.
So the first selector we're going to be talking about is the position selector. So as a review from last time, most CSS code follows this selector format. So basically you have the selector that tells the computer what this piece of code pertains to. And inside the curly braces, you can specify a property with a value and make sure to add a semicolon at the end. This whole thing is called a declaration. So within the curly brackets, you can have multiple declarations, and they all apply to the selector you specified. So if you have multiple selectors, the first one has the broader element and the second one has a smaller element that is within the first one. For this example, I italicized or M text within paragraph text is colored yellow. Basically, in the console, the word important will be colored yellow. Here is another example of selectors. So the code above tells the computer to find a strong tag inside a link inside a list item in an unordered list. So for this example, the words "our program" are hyperlinked and the word "program" is bolded and also colored purple from the CSS code.
All right, so just as a general tip, you should try not to reuse code throughout your program. If you find yourself copying and pasting a particular bit of code, that's a good sign that you should either use an ID or a class. Or if you need to specifically design only one part of your website, you can also use IDs and classes. So IDs are only used for one element on a web page. Therefore, if you need, for example, one specific paragraph to be colored blue, you would use an ID for that case. And classes are used when lots of elements have the same design style, so you don't have to keep on transferring code and being redundant. A common example of this is warning pop-ups. And then overall, both of these just made your code easier to read for yourself and anyone else who might be looking over it.
Moving on to IDs. So to title an ID, just put a hashtag symbol with whatever you want the title to be for that ID, and then follow the same notation as the regular selector with the format of the property, then a colon, and then a value, and then finally make sure to end it with a semicolon. And then you can also refer to the ID in HTML by putting ID equals name of ID in quotations in your opening tag. To title a class, just put a period symbol with whatever you want to title the class. So inside, follow the same notation as the regular selector with the format of property, colon, value, and then semicolon. So for the example, the class is titled warning and it makes code with this class colored red. So you can then refer to the class in HTML by putting class equals whatever name of the class in quotations in your opening tag. And then in this case, it makes the text runaway colored red.
So divs are used to section off pieces of HTML code to give them all a similar style. To do this, you would have a class. In this example, we have a class named boxDiv. That gives everything within that section of code the same design and elements of background color, border, and the specifics, and color. If we look at what this produces in the console, we have something like this. And we can see that each separate box has the same design elements that were specified in the boxDiv class. It has the same blue background, blue color text, and pink border. And this overall gives your website an appealing and organized design to your viewer. And using divs also makes your code cleaner and easier to read. Okay, so now that we learned more about CSS, you all can try adding content to your site or going on to CodePen and creating a new project. Today we have a list of random exercises utilizing classes and IDs. So for example, making all bold text to a certain color, turning images into circular shapes, and changing the background color. If you're stuck, we have the syntax for classes, IDs, and selectors on this slide, as well as the answer to number 3. And then we'll be going over a sample in a couple of seconds, and then we'll close the meeting. So go ahead and pause the video right now to try out these exercises. Okay, so assuming that you've spent some time doing these mini projects, we'll be moving on to the solution. Okay, so here we have a vacation spots website. And if we look at the CSS section here, we have an intro div, a box div, and a table div. Actually, the intro div is only used, I think, once. So this should have actually been an ID, but that's okay. And so we went over the box div during the lesson, but here it is again. And then the table div basically formats the things in the table to match the overall layout of the website, which you can see down here in this section. All right. And that's it. Thank you all so much for watching. Our next video meeting will be released on February 10th, where we'll be discussing CSS priority and also closing our CSS unit. There's a sign-in form again in case you weren't able to fill it out before, and see you all in 2 weeks' time.